Welcome back everyone to yet another episode of KaijuVFX. This is a part 2. The first part came out last week where we created Earthtron Roaring, and now the second part we are going to focus on creating a advanced flame breath effect. And if you didn't see it in part 1, here's what the final product's going to look like. So yeah, like I said, the very first part, if you didn't see that, or you just chose not to watch it, we covered things like the puppet pin tool and just creating a general roaring effect for Earthtron and stuff. So now part 2, right around here, Earthtron is going to be shooting out a flame breath attack. So we're going to get started with that right away. So to start out, I've got our layer here. We're going to be using a third-party plugin for our particles here. This is Particular, which comes from Trapcode. This plugin does cost money, however you can use a free trial if you just want to follow along and play around with this particle system. I'm just going to be using this because I think it allows for a lot more creativity than the built-in particle system in After Effects, which if you didn't know is CC Particle World. And yeah, it's a decent particle system by itself, and you can probably recreate what I'm going to do to a certain degree in that particle system, but we're going to use Trapcode's Particular plugin for this, just because I have a lot more experience with this right now, and I think that will create a better effect overall. So to start out, we're going to play around with the particle system here. By default, Particular just has an emitter that shoots particles outward, but obviously we want to turn this into a beam. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to change the direction type from uniform to directional, which, as you can see, this sort of makes a fountain of particles, so to say. And now we'll also change the emitter type from a point to a sphere. And what that does is, as you can see, if we change up the resolution here, by default on point, let's change this around so you can see a little bit better. When you have a point particle system, all the particles emit from a single point. And obviously, as you can see, that means that they start out very uniform and then gradually spread out over time. And well, we don't want all the particles to come from a single point, so if we change that to sphere, as you can see, there's sort of this little sphere, so to say, of where the particles will be emitting. So now the particles will still spread out over time into a beam shape, but they won't all come from the same one uniform place, and the particles will be a little bit more spread out and randomized. So now we'll play around with the rotation and such until we find a little area that we're happy with, where the particles will look like they're coming out of a stream from Earthtron's mouth. Something like this looks good. Play around with the velocity a little bit so that stream comes out a little faster, and we'll up the amount of particles just a tad so you can see what we're doing. So now as you can see what the particles are doing, they start out in this nice little stream of sort of a beam that we like, but then over time they spread out way more than we'd really like. So now if you take a look at these particles now, they're spreading out a little bit too much for a beam that would fit Earthtron. So what we'll do is we will go over to the direction spread percent and turn that down to about 9% or so. And so that gives us a little bit more of a uniform beam the whole way. The particles still spread out a little bit, which is what I was going for, but now the particles will not spread out as much as they were before. So the next thing we're going to do is just change the type of particles here in this little stream. And to do that, we're going to go into the Effects Builder window, which in particular, this essentially renders what your particle stream is looking like in real time. And this allows you also to change around all sorts of settings and stuff to your liking. So we're going to click on the Particle tab right here and go up to this little drop-down menu up here. We'll scroll down to Smoke and Fire. And so as you can see, we have all sorts of little, well, smoke and fire entities that we can turn these particles into. So we have all sorts of different things, and the good thing about these are all not just still images like you might imagine they are, but rather these are all small little animated sprites that each of these particles will be. So we'll choose Fire Loop 1, and now we're getting that sort of real flame breath effect that we really like. So now we're going to click Apply. And as you can see, the flame breath is now comprised of real flames. So next we're going to go into the Particle tab here, and we're going to go into the Size over Life here and click the pen here. So right now the particles are just appearing out of nowhere at the very beginning here. which can look a little bit awkward. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this first point, bring that all the way to the bottom, create a second point right here, and bring that up so that this way the particles will start out at a size of 0 essentially, and almost immediately jump up to their full size, which gives us this tiny little start at the beginning here, and the particles will quickly generate into their full size. What we can also do is play around with the size random %, which what this does is it will randomly make different particles different sizes than the size that you set it at. So right now the size is at 50, and setting the size random % at 100 as opposed to say 0, where all the particles are the same size. Instead now there are some fire particles like this one that are super small, and ones throughout that are really, really big. So that really adds a lot of variety to this effect. And then next we're going to go into physics, air, and we're going to play around with the wind settings a little bit so that these particles will go even faster down this way. So we'll play around with the wind X and the wind Y a little bit, and the wind Z. And in doing that, the particles now move quite a bit faster. And I'll keep playing around with the wind settings and all that stuff real quick. So if you just give me 1 second. Alright, so now we've got the particles moving at a pretty good speed compared to what I like. So next we're going to just add a little bit more flares to say sort of this particle. So we're going to go into the physics again. We're going to go into the turbulence field, and we'll affect the position. We'll bring that up just a little bit, maybe 98 or so. We'll bring down the scale to say 3, bring up the complexity to about 6, and bring up the octave scale and multiplier just a little bit. So that just sort of makes the wave of particles look a little bit more, well, wavy, so to say. So now if we unsolo this and we go to where Earthtron is firing his beam, yeah, you can start to see how this effect is taking shape. However, there are a couple things that aren't looking so hot right now. One of those is, as you can see, around the particles, there's sort of this black outline beneath all of them. And it doesn't look too good. So to remedy that, we're going to go into the layer options and change the blending mode from normal to screen. So that does get rid of the sort of black outline around all that flame stuff, but at the same time, the effect is not as vibrant as it once was. But there's a couple ways that we're going to be able to fix that. So first of all, we're going to add a glow effect to this layer. And we'll play around with these settings and such, and the glow radius. Change this to screen. We will change the glow colors to A and B colors, change the color looping to sawtooth A is greater than B. And now we will set color A to be a bright orangish, and color B will be a more reddish orange, so to say. So you can see a little before and after with the glow right here. So now before we do anything else, I want to animate this particle stream so that it moves along with Earthtron's mouth. So we'll solo this, and as you can see at the very beginning here, here's how the particle stream is going to look as soon as it is coming out of Earthtron's mouth. So we'll unclick the eye on that for now, and just find the point now where Earthtron is first going to be firing out that beam. It looks like right about there is where we want the beam to start. So we'll bring the flame right there to the starting point. That way, as soon as the flame starts, it will be coming out of Earthtron's mouth. And we'll move this layer to go behind the Earthtron mouth and all that stuff. And we're going to keyframe the position X, Y of the particle emitter. And so now I'll just go throughout the entire time the Earthtron is firing his beam real quick and animate this to follow his mouth. Alright, so now we've got the stream of particles animated to follow Earthtron's mouth as he moves around and shoots the beam and stuff. And at the very end, we want this particle stream to obviously, well, stop when Earthtron is closing his mouth. So we'll set a keyframe right about here on the particles per second. Press U so we can see that. And we'll go to about right here and set that to 0. And we'll maybe bring that back a little bit. So now Earthtron will stop firing his beams after a short while. And maybe we'll turn up the velocity of the particles just a little bit. And one more thing we can do to make the particle effects really shine, and I'm going to disable motion blur on all these parts of Earthtron real quick just so we can see this, and enable motion blur on the particle layer, turn that on, and as we can see, the flame breath is now, well, it has motion blur, which before it was very well defined, so to say. You can see like everything that was going on, but obviously when these flames are moving super fast, you don't actually see that. So we turn motion blur on, and we get a much better look for that flame, so to say. Alright, so now we're going to do a couple of things to fix up the blending situation with these fire particles, so to say. Because right now they're pretty translucent and they just sort of look there. They don't have much impact to them. So right quick, we're going to just rename this Flames 1. And we're going to duplicate that layer, which just gives us a second layer that's the exact same thing. And in this one, we're going to go into the particle tab and change the particle type from sprite to sphere, and that gives us, well, this essentially. We're going to turn down the size of these to about 27 or so, and we're going to change the color to sort of a reddish orange. Let me bring up the size just a tad bit more, and you can see what that does for us. That just sort of adds a tiny bit of extra glow. Maybe we change those to glow spheres, and that looks a little bit better. We'll turn the opacity of those down a little bit, make the opacity a little bit more random. Maybe make that more of an orangish color. And then we'll duplicate that again, and this time we'll make the particles on that layer black, change the blending mode back from screen to normal, and we've got this situation going on now. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a fast box blur to that layer. We'll thin out those black particles a little bit. Maybe we'll just disable, or we'll change around this one for now. Change those back to spheres, maybe. Bring the opacity back up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we've got that fast blur on that now. Looks like that. And you also add a key light effect, and we bring up the brightness to 79 or so. Bring the contrast down to 57 or so, negative 57 that is. And you can kind of see what that's doing for us. That's giving a lot more definition to the highlights and contrast of the actual flames itself, while keeping the smoke part actually outside of the flame still. So we can enable motion blur on all three of those to see what that will look like in the end. Alright, so I played around with the glows and all that stuff a little bit, added a couple more glows to the main stream of particles right here. So now we've got that going on. And now what I want to do is I want to duplicate the flames layer once again. So we'll keep this one on top for now, and we'll solo this just to see what we're working with. We'll bring down the number of particles quite a bit, just about 100 for now. And we're going to bring up the velocity random, the direction spread, not that much. But essentially what we're going to do here is just sort of get some extra flame particles flying everywhere. So we'll also make these a lot smaller, maybe change that to about 24 or so. That looks about right. Up the amount of those, and if we unsolo that, and we can also go into physics, air, and the turbulence field, and bring down the effect position just so that they don't look as random. We'll keep just playing around with this. Maybe we'll change these just to spheres for now. We'll bring the size of those down quite a bit. Maybe we'll turn motion blur off for those for now. Make those 2 roughly. Change the color of those to reddish orange. Set the blend mode to add. Alright, so just playing around with the settings a little bit here. We'll go into the opacity over life and hit randomize, so these things will essentially flicker the entire time that they're being shot out of Earthtron's mouth. Bring the velocity up, maybe the velocity random a little bit as well. The distribution up a tiny bit maybe as well. Maybe we'll also go into the aux system, set that to continuously emit, which the aux system essentially, every time that there's a particle, that particle will emit other particles as it's being shot around. So we'll bring the particles per second up to about 81, bring the velocity of those up, set the size of those down to 0.5, set the opacity over life to be randomized just like they were before. Maybe we'll bring up the amount a little bit more, maybe not. Maybe we'll set these to be cloudlets. We can have them color from main, give them a lot of velocity, maybe not that much. Maybe we'll actually bring down the emit probability with the particles per second down a little bit too, and we'll bring the velocity back down to 0. Size over life, we'll randomize that as well just so they flicker out of existence even more. And just so we can see what the final thing is going to look like, we'll solo all of these layers, bring the resolution up to half. And there we go. So that's basically what we're working with now. We got this big main flame effect with a lot of smaller particles being shot out of the side. And we can maybe turn on motion blur for that layer too, and that looks a tiny bit better. So we'll keep it like that for now. Alright, so what I've done now is I've moved the 3 flames that glow, not counting the smoke one, up to in front of Earthtron. And real quick, we're going to pre-compose these, move all attributes into a new composition. And we're just going to animate a little mask around Earthtron's mouth so that the particles will still show up. But we got to change that back to screen. Yeah, so the particles will still show up in front of Earthtron's mouth. Safe for behind it, obviously. Feather that out just a tad. So we're just going to animate this mask real quick just to make sure that it stays around Earthtron's mouth the entire time the flame is going. Alright, so now that the flame breath effect is essentially done, we need to add some explosions. Earthtron's shooting his flame breath to blow stuff up. So let's just disable these flame layers real quick. And we're going to be using some stock effects from KaijuVFX. These are stock effects that you have to pay for, but they are extremely high quality stuff, and I cannot recommend them enough. So first of all, what I want to do first is add a couple of fireballs to this composition for when Earthtron first sort of releases that heat beam. So we'll disable that again, and we'll look through these fireball effects until I find one real quick that I want to use. Alright, so I think we'll use this one right here. And so we'll fit this to be on Earthtron's mouth real quick. We'll just rotate this, maybe move the anchor point to back here. Scale this down a little bit. And rotate that a bit more actually. Just so this is all coming out of Earthtron's mouth as he releases the beam. So we'll place the effect right here and bring it back to when the flame first actually starts to come out of Earthtron's mouth. We'll keyframe the position and rotation a little bit because the flame is a tiny bit continuous. We'll move it to go right about there, so that looks good. And maybe we'll move it up a little bit right about here. So first thing we're going to do is add a solid composite, and we'll make that black so we can see more clearly what we're doing. We're going to add an exposure effect and just bring that up quite a bit. Then we'll add a glow effect. Change the glow mode to screen. Glow colors to A and B, sawtooth A is greater than B, same thing that we did before. Make this first glow color a bright orange, that second one a more scarlet sort of color. Alright, so I just played around with the glows a little bit and we got something that looks like that. And that looks pretty decent. I'll just add a couple more fireball effects real quick just so we can get a better feel for how this will look. Alright, so I've just added a couple of fireballs to the flame effect here, with the same glow techniques and all that stuff that I did with the first one. And compositing explosions and fireballs could be its own tutorial all in itself. Maybe I'll do that at some point if you guys want to see that. But for now, let's move on to the actual explosions. So we'll just drag and drop an explosion effect over here somewhere, and we'll re-enable this flame breath just so we can see when it's first going to hit the ground, right about there. So we'll disable that once again. So we've got this explosion effect right here, and we'll time it so that it goes off right about then. Maybe we'll move that down just a tad, scale it up maybe. Alright, but we'll leave that position there and copy that for later. For now, we'll just keep it right here so that we can see what we're doing more clearly. So first we're going to add another solid composite, just because we're going to be blending this explosion and all that good stuff. And we're going to set the blending mode to screen. So we'll add an exposure effect and bring that up to bring out those highlights a lot. Add a glow layer. Same process as before. Set the glow to add. A and B color, sawtooth A greater than B. So that first color would be orangish. And then that second color will be an even darker orange. We'll set that to about 250 or so. Play with the threshold a little bit, duplicate that. Bring that up even more. And then final glow, just be a radius of 10, just so we can bring out the highlights a lot. And we'll have to duplicate that solid composite and put it after the first glow so we can get rid of all that stuff. So we can already see that this is turning out pretty decently, but as with before, we're dealing with some translucency issues. So we will duplicate this explosion layer, delete all those effects on that one, and set that to normal. We're going to add a hue and saturation effect. We'll just turn the lightness down all the way so that we end up with a completely black explosion here, as you can see. We'll add a fast blacks blur, bring that up about 29, and we'll add a key light effect and do some edge color correcting. So we'll enable edge color correction, bring up the brightness just a little bit, and there we go. Now we've got something that looks pretty decent there. So we'll put all that over there. And since this is a big explosion, we'll set the time stretch of these to 200 so that that explosion goes off quite a bit slower. And we'll preview that real quick. That's looking nice. Alright, and so we'll add one more explosion off to the very side. We'll just add this 4K one right here. Drag that forward so we can see what it's doing. We'll set the time stretch of this one to 200 as well. Set it about there. There we go. And so what we can just do to make this easy on ourselves is copy over all of the effects on this explosion onto that one. Duplicate that, make sure we set it to screen. This one will be normal. Take all those effects, delete them. Take all of these effects from the second part of the explosion, paste them there. We'll bring this explosion above the smoke layer for the other explosion. Unsolo both of those. Click those and we'll drag those over here roughly, and we'll put those as starts a little bit later after the first explosion. Alright, so now we've got something like this going on. So we'll disable those explosions and all that stuff for now. Disable the flame breath. We're going to add another fireball effect that will just sort of send a wave of fire out toward Earthtron caused by the explosions or something. We'll look for a good one to use. Let's see. This one should be good. So we'll take this fireball effect, put this on top of all the explosions, go forward a bit, We'll flip that horizontally, bring the scale up quite a bit, and actually maybe bring that down a little bit. Set the time stretch to 150 maybe. Bring this back even more, just so that this explosion or fireball really gets started once the explosions get going and all that stuff. We'll move that down even more a little bit, and then we'll take all these effects that we had from the original fireballs, put them on that one, set it to screen. There we go. So now if we enable everything, we've got something that's looking like this, which is pretty cool, but there's still even more explosive stuff that we have to do. So once again, we'll just turn all of these off for now so that we can see what we're doing clearly. So obviously when there's an explosion, there's something blowing up. So we're gonna add some debris elements from KaijuVFX and essentially make some concrete and debris and all that stuff explode as these explosions are going on. So we'll take some of these stock effects and we'll stretch the time to about 200. And let's enable these explosions so that we can see when stuff should be going off. So we'll have that debris all flying right there. Maybe we'll scale that up a little bit. Maybe we'll position the effect downward a little bit. There we go. And we'll just do this a couple of times until we get all that sweet debris flying everywhere that we want. Alright, so we've got all of that debris being exploded as the flame breath is blowing up the street, supposedly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these debris elements, pre-compose them, move them to a new composition, and we're also going to do something real quick. We're going to copy all of the effects that we put on those explosions and delete them from both of those, and now we're going to pre-compose those explosion layers. So we've got this debris right here. We'll name that debris, and then we'll name this explosions, just so we know which is which. We'll move the explosions on top of the debris layer, and so then on the explosions layer we're going to add a set matte effect. So we'll set that to debris and we'll invert that matte. And this might not look like it does much at first, but once we copy and paste those effects, like earlier, you'll see what's going to happen now. So we'll paste all those effects onto there, set that to screen. And so now as you can see, that's applying all those glows that we did earlier, essentially. And what that does is essentially make the debris affected by the glow of the explosions, which adds a lot more realism. And maybe we'll add a hue and saturation effect to the debris layer and turn down the lightness just a little bit, just so it looks like that explosion's super bright. Maybe we'll go into this debris layer too and add even more debris. We'll copy and paste those ones from earlier, flip those horizontally. So now that we've got all the explosions and good stuff done, let's take another preview and see what we've got. Alright, so that's what we've got so far. Looking really, really good. Actually, real quick, just gotta move that fireball effect down below the debris. Alright, we're almost there, guys. We're almost done with this very massive effect. There's just a couple more things left to take care of. First of all, so when there's the huge flame breath and huge explosions like there are right here, there's going to be a bit of lighting involved and shadows are going to be cast. So on this railing we're going to take a hue and saturation effect, and we're going to keyframe the channel range. And so when that flame effect becomes full, we'll bring the brightness down just a tad, and then maybe when those explosions are getting like super big and stuff, we'll bring the lighting down even more. Just bring it down a tad right there. And right there's a big explosion, so we'll bring the lighting down even more. Just keep on bringing that down while the explosions are going on. And then gradually over time, as the explosions dissipate, we'll return that back to 0 so that the lighting looks normal. But that's not all we can do. We can take the Earthtron composition. We'll pre-compose that Earthtron layer and duplicate it. And right around here, we'll make a mask around Earthtron, and we'll animate that as the flame breath and such is going on, so that it covers, say, like the front side of Earthtron completely, essentially. Alright, so we've got that done. We'll feather this mask out quite a bit. What we'll do now is we'll add a curves effect, and we'll increase the brightness on this layer, bring up the red channels, bring up the green just a tad, and then bring down the blue. Maybe we'll bring down the yellow a tiny bit too. Yeah, so we'll do that. Keep bumping up all that, bump up the red even more maybe. Here we go. And so we'll animate the opacity of this as well. By pressing T, and we'll set a keyframe for that. Right there, we'll say is when all that should be done. And then on the base layer, we'll add a hue and saturation effect. Do the same thing as we did with the railing, and set a keyframe for the channel range. And as the explosions are getting bright, we'll keep on lowering the master lightness until that eventually returns to normal as well. And something we can even do to really accentuate how bright and powerful these flames and explosions are is we'll keyframe the opacity of the sky here, and as everything's getting super bright and stuff, we'll darken the sky just a tad, maybe set it to about 93, maybe lower it even more, just to like 92 or 91 or something as it's getting super bright, and then we'll quickly return that back to 100. That just really sells how bright these flames are, really. And so now we'll quickly just repeat that process to all of the other buildings here. And so here's what we've got now after all that. Looking really, really good. Just a couple of real quick things that I want to do to really make this effect come together. First of those is we're going to add a lens flare. So we're going to be using optical flares from Video Copilot. This is unfortunately another paid plugin. However, this is really completely optional. This is what I'm just doing to accentuate this effect a lot. So we're going to go into the options here for the lens flare. Go to Pro Presets, and one that I like to use for explosions a lot is a preset called Red Dwarf. One of the things I like to do though is turn off the center flicker, the base star, and the base star brightener. Or not, yeah, the base star brightener, just so you're left with this one single little glow. And so we'll set this to start going off right as the explosions are being set off, so we'll keyframe the brightness and position, and we'll just keep keyframing this so that it gets brighter and brighter over time. And we'll change up the flickering on this lens flare a little bit, and that will really just help make this effect look that much better. And obviously, like I said, this is not something that you have to do. It's just something that I generally like to do. And something else we can do with optical flares that's really cool is if we go into the options and we go to the lens texture, we can change the texture image to something like maybe spastic is one that I like to use quite a bit. We do something like that, you get this sort of dirty lens texture. We can keep playing around with those, maybe coarse or something. Yeah, something like that that just looks a little bit dirty, like the camera's been beaten up from this monster battle. Alright, so now it's time to wrap up the whole thing. We're going to pre-compose everything into a new composition. Actually, I got to re-enable an adjustment layer from part 1 before we do that. Alright, so now we've got everything in one single composition, which means it's time for everyone's favorite, camera shake. So camera shake is very, very easy in After Effects. The first thing we're going to do is apply a motion tile effect to the entire composition, and we're going to change the output width to about 120 or so each. And we're going to check mirror edges. And what this does, if you drag the composition around, you have this sort of area that's just mirrored, so to say, from the original composition, which sort of allows you to play around with camera shaking in lots. So we're going to set keyframes for the position, and we'll go throughout the entire thing real quick, and we'll set a couple keyframes, one at the very beginning and one at the very end, and then we will set ones between when Earthtron is roaring, and then we will also set some for when the heat beam is going on. So now that we've got all these keyframes, we're going to use the power of the wiggler effect to shake the camera around everywhere. So for these times where there's nothing happening, we're going to just set the camera shake frequency to 1, maybe the magnitude to about 14. And that'll be just during all these parts where there's nothing going on. And then here we have Earthtron roaring, so we'll set the frequency to about 21, magnitude maybe about 4, and we'll see how that looks. Maybe we'll change that a bit to maybe only be magnitude of about 3. Alright, so just played around with that a bit. And then now when the heat beam's going, we'll change the frequency to about 22 with a magnitude of maybe 7. So now we've got some basic camera shake going on here, and that's essentially what that gives us. So now what I like to do, whenever there's a big beam or something going off, I like to add just frame by frame camera shake to make the impacts much greater. So we'll just go frame by frame here when the beam is first being set off, and set the keyframes essentially to be a lot more spastic than they are. And then we'll go forward a bit until the explosion starts, and then we'll really shake that camera around. Go forward a bit to that second explosion. Set all that. Maybe we'll add a couple keyframes back here for the position and such. And now we'll see what that gives us. Here we go. So now whenever there's an explosion going off, the camera shakes a lot more violently than it otherwise would. Maybe we'll go in here and calm it down a little bit during the initial firing of the beam. There we go. And another thing we can do is we can also keyframe the rotation a little bit and adjust that slightly throughout this entire thing, just so the ground is really shaking and the camera's moving around and all that stuff. And we will add motion blur to all of the camera shaking just so it looks that much more real. And well, that does it for this episode of KaijuVFX. I hope you guys enjoyed this two-parter effect showcase. I've got a big lineup of requests to do for these videos, and so if you have any effect that you want to see done, suggest it in the comments and I'll try to do any that I have time for. I've got quite a few of these to do, so yeah, it may take me a while to get to them, but rest assured I am listening to your suggestions, and I will do as many of these effects as I can. But other than that, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys here next time for whatever it is that I have to offer.